Look at this painting. A man and a woman locked in an embrace, his lips pressed to hers, her hands gripping his cloak as if she's trying to hold on to something that's already slipping away. And one foot lifted slightly off the ground as if she's being pulled or falling or both. At first glance, it looks like a love scene, and it is, but it is also something else entirely. This is The Kiss, painted in 1859 by the Italian artist Francesco Hayez, and hidden inside what looks like a private moment between two lovers is one of the most politically charged images in the history of Italian art. To understand what Hayez painted, you first need to understand the world he painted it in. In 1859, Italy did not exist, not as a unified nation. The peninsula was a patchwork of kingdoms, duchies, and foreign-occupied territories. The Austrian Empire controlled the north, and it controlled it with the full weight of imperial surveillance, spies, censors, soldiers in the streets. The papacy controlled the center. Naples and Sicily answered to their own Bourbon monarchy in the south, and across every corner of this divided land, a generation of Italians burned with a single desire: to change all of it. This movement had a name, the Risorgimento, a political and cultural campaign, part revolution, part romance, to unite the fragmented Italian states into one sovereign nation. It produced soldiers and poets, conspirators and martyrs, men who died young in border skirmishes, women who hid pamphlets under floorboards, families split down the middle by what it meant to be Italian when there was no Italy to belong to. And it produced Francesco Hayez. He was not a soldier, he was a painter. But he understood something that generals sometimes forget, that images can do what speeches cannot. They reach people who never read pamphlets. They make an idea feel true before it has been proven. They give a cause a face and more than a face, a feeling. And feelings in the end are what move people to act. The Kiss was his contribution to the fight. Francesco Hayez was born in Venice in 1791, a city that had itself been passed between foreign rulers like a piece of furniture nobody wanted to keep. He trained in Rome, steeped in neoclassicism, the cold discipline style that dominated European painting at the turn of the century. Precise anatomy, idealized form, subjects drawn from antiquity. Hayez absorbed it all, and then slowly and deliberately moved away from it. He became the defining figure of Italian Romanticism, a movement less interested in formal perfection and more concerned with emotion, history, and the particular drama of the Italian soul. Where neoclassicism looked to ancient Rome for its heroes, Romanticism looked closer to the medieval past, to Dante and Ariosto, to the stories of a people who had once been powerful and now lived under other men's flags. Hayez's subjects were knights in armor, biblical heroes, scenes from Tasso's Jerusalem Delivered, historical distance used as a lens to examine the present. It was a technique with a long tradition, and Hayez used it masterfully. He knew that censors were less likely to confiscate a painting of a medieval farewell than a painting of a revolutionary sending off his son. By the time he painted The Kiss, he was 68 years old, a professor at the Brera Academy in Milan, the most prestigious art institution in northern Italy, where he had spent decades shaping generations of painters. He had built a reputation that gave him some degree of protection. He had earned the right, perhaps, to take risks that younger artists could not afford. And yet this painting, made in the final chapter of his career, would become the image that defined everything that came before it. One work that gathered all his themes, love, sacrifice, history, and compressed them into a single moment. Now look at the painting again. The setting is deliberately vague. A stone staircase, a shadowed arch, rough medieval masonry that could belong to almost any century. The background reveals nothing. No country, no city, no specific era. The two figures are dressed in medieval costume, that familiar romantic device for speaking about the present while pretending to speak about the past. In a city under Austrian surveillance where art exhibitions were attended by informers, you did not paint revolution openly. You couldn't afford to, so you painted a kiss instead. But look at the colors. The man wears a deep red cloak. In 1859, that red was not a neutral choice. It was the color of the Risorgimento, the color worn by Garibaldi's volunteers, the famous red-shirted fighters who were at that very moment preparing to march for Italian unification. When Milanese viewers stood in front of this painting in the year of its exhibition, they would have recognized that red immediately. It was the color of the cause, the color of sacrifice. The woman's dress is pale blue and white. Those were the colors of France, specifically of the French tricolor. And France in 1859 was not merely a historical reference, it was a geopolitical fact. Napoleon III had entered into a secret alliance with the Kingdom of Sardinia, agreeing to provide military support against Austria in exchange for territorial concessions. French bayonets would be decisive in the wars of independence that followed. Without France, the Risorgimento might have faltered. Read together, the image becomes a farewell. A soldier in revolutionary red, departing for a war he may not survive, kissing goodbye to a woman dressed in the colors of the ally he is marching toward. Not just a private moment, a national one, the cost of history made intimate. But Hayez is too intelligent a painter to let the symbolism overwhelm the human moment. And this is where the painting becomes truly extraordinary. What makes this work endure, more than 160 years after it was painted, is not the politics hidden inside it. It is the feeling on the surface. Look at her hands. One grips his cloak at the shoulder, fingers curled tight into the fabric, knuckles almost white with the pressure of the grip. The other presses flat against his back. There's nothing passive in those gestures. She is not simply receiving this kiss, she is prolonging it, refusing to release it, holding the moment open by force of will, because once she opens her hands, he leaves. Look at his posture. He leans into her with his full weight, his face turned away from us and pressed against hers. We cannot see his expression, but we don't need to. His body tells us everything. The forward lean, the slight bend of the knee, the way his whole frame tips toward her, even as his foot is already angled toward the stairs. And then there's the detail that stops you when you notice it. Her left foot barely lifted from the ground, suspended, balanced between here and not here. It is one of the most quietly devastating gestures in all of 19th century painting. He's already leaving. The kiss is already becoming a memory, and she knows it. Her body is already beginning the motion of return back to a room and an absence, but she hasn't made the decision yet. She's living in the last possible second before she has to. That hidden foot is a whole world of grief, condensed into a centimeter of canvas. Hayez returned to this image 3 times. The first version, painted in 1859, is the one the world knows. Warm amber light, deep saturated reds. It is a painting that seems to generate its own warmth, as if the emotion inside it has raised the temperature of the room. A second version followed in 1861, a third in 1869, a full decade after the first. The compositions are closely related, but the colors shift between them. Small details change in ways that scholars have spent generations debating. Does the 1861 version feel more melancholy? Is the light in the 1869 canvas more resigned? What never changes is the emotional core, the pair of hands that will not let go, the foot that has not yet landed, the refusal to let sentiment soften what is at its heart an act of grief, wearing the costume of desire. Why return to the same image 3 times? Perhaps because the moment it depicted took time to fully resolve. Italy achieved unification in 1861. The new kingdom was proclaimed. The Risorgimento had won. And yet Hayez kept returning to the parting as if he understood that the sacrifice had to be honored again and again. Not just once, and not just in public celebrations. When the kiss was first exhibited in Milan in 1859, it became an immediate sensation. The timing was not coincidental, it was precise. That same year, the Second Italian War of Independence had broken out. Austria and the Kingdom of Sardinia, backed by France, were at war across the northern plains. The outcome was not yet clear. Cities that had lived under foreign rule for generations were watching the horizon. The painting arrived into that world like something the world had been waiting for. It became a mirror for everything the Risorgimento felt and everything it feared. The question that every family was asking in some form: will he come back? People recognized themselves in it. Not just artists and critics, but ordinary people as well. Shopkeepers and students, mothers and wives, men who had sent brothers south to fight. The painting required no explanation. It didn't need captions or pamphlets. It already knew what they were feeling, and it gave that feeling a shape. That is the rarest achievement in art. Not beauty, not technical mastery, not even originality, but the uncanny sense that a painting was somehow waiting for you, that it had preserved something you thought no image could hold. Today, the kiss hangs in the Pinacoteca di Brera in Milan, the same institution where Hayez spent his career shaping generations of Italian artists. There's something fitting about that. The man who taught the painters of a unified Italy left his most celebrated work in the house where he taught them. To stand in front of it is to feel even now the pressure of that original moment. It does not feel like a document of the past. It feels immediate, the way grief always feels immediate, even when it belongs to someone else, even when it is 160 years old. That is what Hayez understood, and what makes this more than a beautiful painting, more than a clever piece of political symbolism, more than a technically accomplished work by a gifted artist. The most powerful political art never looks like a statement. It looks like a man and a woman in a moment that is already ending. If this moved you, leave a comment below, and if you want more, subscribe. There's a lot more waiting. One more thing, a few of you have been asking where to buy prints of the paintings I cover. I actually own the shop that's been sponsoring the channel, Galleria 48. I didn't mention it before to keep things unbiased, but since so many of you are asking, the link is in the description.